Welcome to Second Look Education. I'm Amy.
And I'm Candace.
We're educators examining what's really happening in classrooms, policy, and teacher preparation. When joy is treated as optional, when professional judgment is replaced by scripts, and when compliance is mistaken for quality, both teachers and children pay the cost.
This podcast is our refusal to normalize that. Are we educating for compliance or for a future of educated critical thinkers?
That question drives everything we do. Each episode starts with a real moment from education, something observed, experienced, or encountered that made us pause and ask, what's actually going on here?
We dig into the complexity, we reject false binaries, and we refuse to pretend that what we're seeing is sustainable. This is Second Look Education.
Welcome to Second Look Education Podcast. We're excited that you're here with us. Please be gentle. This is our first podcast and we are just getting started. We're going to start out by introducing ourselves, letting you know where we come from, what our goals are. And so with that, I'd like to introduce Amy.
Hi, welcome. My name's Amy Kelly. I am a mom of three beautiful children. I have a sixth grader right now, a fourth grader, and a second grader who keep us very busy. I am a teacher. I started my career as a special education teacher. I moved into gen ed classrooms and I love teaching. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher from the time I was in kindergarten. I would teach my neighbors. So it was natural for me to go into the classroom and I loved it. I wanted to change the world and I realized I only had, 20 kids in my class. So I thought I was going to go be a principal. And then I was going to be a superintendent. I was going to run the show and I was going to be in charge and change the world that way. And I got my master's and realized I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that far removed from teaching. And so I went another direction and continued my education, met Candace through that and ended up as a teacher educator. And I felt like I could have this larger impact by educating teachers and supporting their growth. And that's what I do now. And educating teachers is a funny thing because when people ask you what you do, you teach teachers. It's kind of a weird thing to say.
That's literally what I say.
And it's through that experience that this podcast came to be. But beyond that, professionally, I am a researcher and a writer. And so my original research for my dissertation was in high stakes standardized testing and those systems that are in place. And I'm sure our conversations are going to come back to that a lot. And beyond assessment, I've really shifted my research into reflection in different ways and using different methodologies to do that, and student voice and now teacher voice. And we work with artificial intelligence and how that impacts our practice and what we do with our students. And most recently, my passion has been around screen use and over screen use in classrooms that we're seeing and my own children, right? But yeah, that's a little bit about me. Why don't you tell them about yourself?
So I'm also a mom. My children are a little older. I have a 17-year-old son and a 19-year-old daughter. I'm married. I've been in education for over 23 years. I was in a daycare setting for a bit, working with pre-kindergarten mostly, sometimes toddlers as well. I taught third and fifth grade for about 11 years, third, first, and then fifth grade, and in public setting. And I did make the decision to go into administration. I actually had a superintendent who encouraged me. And it's funny because my freshman year, when I was learning about the systems in education and inequity and how they're set, I wrote a paper and I talked about how I wanted to eventually become the superintendent of CPS and change all the things. And then I got into the system and I was like, whew, there's a lot more going on. And so I hesitated in getting my administrative degree. And then my superintendent at the time was like, no, you need to do this, and really encouraged and supported me. And so I did get my degree so that I could be an administrator. And in the meantime, I also decided a couple years later to get my doctorate in leadership, and that was with Amy. And during that time, my superintendent was also a huge support, and I became an assistant principal in the same district during that time. And from there, after I finished my doctorate and graduated, uh, did the hooding, I ended up in a private school in a city area that was K-8, and I was their principal for a few years. And so my lens really is educator, practitioner, and then my leadership perspective as well. During that time, I've also been part of a consulting group that does SEL and professional development. I'm on the governing board of a Head Start program, and my research varies. So I have various work in teacher empowerment and autonomy, integrated curriculum. You mentioned AI. We have some work and research in ethical uses of AI, culturally relevant teaching pedagogy, whole child language learning and development, school culture, and trauma-informed practices. So always looking to learn and grow. And so I guess that's one of the things that I do carry with me is this like passion for learning and wanting to know and understand.
And so the purpose in telling you who we are, right, is both to let you know that we are not commentators, like looking in on what's going on in education. We're living it. We're living it, and we're trying to make sense of what is going on. And so, we're trying to make sense of it for ourselves and for our children and for our students and for you to take moments and look at them and dissect them and think about them. So, we started having these conversations probably forever about things that go on in schools. And
Well, I think our doctoral program asked us to think critically. It opened our eyes, and actually, sometimes it was gut wrenching because the things we learned, it's like once you see, you can't unsee.
Right.
And so you almost have to go through this process. So our program, when we were getting our doctorate, started that. And then when we both found our way to the same university and we're teaching teachers, I think these conversations became even more important.
Right. And particularly for us as teacher educators, we look at what we do and how we prepare our pre-service teachers and in, developmentally appropriate practice and based in, long-standing research and theory that drives the field of education itself. And yet there's a disconnect between what our students are actually walking into in the classrooms that they teach in and do field experiences and all of those things. And also, we recognize that there was a disconnect between what we're teaching, what we know we should be doing in classrooms, and what our kids were doing and what they were bringing home and how they felt about school. And so, these conversations kept happening around all of those types of things.
Yeah, I mean, those are our biggest moments, right? So we're teaching these future teachers and we're applying these theories and these best practices, not to overuse the buzzword, but these practices and these strategies. And then they're going into the classroom and they're coming back and they're like, we can't do this. This is what we're being told. And so, navigating that system in itself has really created a lot of conversation. And then again, our own children, and we are lucky in the fact that like my children are older and so their experiences were a little bit different. We had my children were deeply embedded during the COVID experience. I had a fifth grader and an eighth grader and what led from there. And then technology was increasing, but then your kids have so much more technology at this point, and so they're younger, and so that perspective is helpful. In addition to the fact that my husband is not in education, nor is yours, and so we get that perspective of okay, they don't, even though they're with educators who talk all this stuff, and they have to listen to us. It also reminds us that when you're not in the system, that it's really hard to understand. We use so many acronyms and throw so many things around. So it gives us a healthy perspective on those that aren't teaching. It's like a whole new language.
Yeah, that's it. That's it, right? That's the whole purpose of this is taking these little moments that we all see, whether you're a parent or a student or a pre-service teacher or just any type of stakeholder in education. You care about education. You see what's going on, right? And then we talk about it and we move on. We say something like, oh, that's just how it is, or, that's just how it's going to be. And so what we're doing with this work is peeling back the layers, right? And really taking a closer look at what structures are in place to make this moment happen, to open all of our eyes to that, because sometimes it's hard to see that in whatever we're looking at, the little thing, right? Whatever that may be. And so this space gives us a chance to do that, to talk about them, to look at what's behind there. And then, of course, what do we do with this information?
Well, and we have that educator perspective. And so as we're in it, but we also understand that it in order to engage with this work, everybody's at a different level and different level of understanding. And it's really easy in our silos to say, like, this is how I feel, this is what I've seen, and not really dissect or discuss. And so instead, like, if we could do this together, then there could be more conversation. And then those that maybe are like, I don't understand why it's this way, but it's not for me to understand, and just shut down, we can explore and we can all take a little more critical lens to everything that's happening.
Yeah. So let's get into why we're doing this. So we wanted to make clear our intentions. And so this part might seem a little not so much off the cuff. We're going to actually be reading some of this because we thought it was that important. We tried. We really did. This has been, like we said, a long time coming, and preparing and getting ready. And the more that we tried to just wing this part, the more we kept coming back to, actually, no, we need to lay this foundation for ourselves, right? But for also whoever may be listening.
Just with anything else, you hear about your why, but also your mission and values, so that we stay true to that. And then those that are listening know what to expect. So what is this show? It's a practitioner scholar podcast examining the growing gap between how teachers are prepared and how systems ask them to teach. We analyze policy, curriculum, technology, and instructional trends through a developmental, relational, and classroom reality lens. This show exists because conversations about education have become increasingly oversimplified, while classrooms have become more complex. We kept having the same honest, difficult conversations in hallways, classrooms, and preparation programs, and realized they weren't being had publicly or outside of small groups. We are not neutral. We are thoughtful, evidence-informed, and grounded in lived practice, staying silent about these conditions, shaping teaching and learning no longer feels responsible.
This kind of work matters now, because particularly for us, because we are preparing teachers to design, responsive, developmentally appropriate, relationship-centered learning, right? And we're watching the systems narrow their autonomy and standardize their judgments and remove the very conditions that make good teaching possible. And so this is big for us, but when joy is treated as optional, and when professional judgment is replaced by scripts, and when compliance is mistaken for quality, both teachers and children pay the cost.
This podcast is our refusal to normalize that. So what do we believe? We believe children are developing humans, not data points. Learning is developmental and relational before it is technical. Joy is not extra, it is evidence of healthy learning conditions. Regulation, belonging, and engagement are prerequisites for learning.
And our teachers are professionals, not script followers. Professional judgment matters. Autonomy supports better instruction. Teachers deserve working conditions that make good teaching possible, and we will never, ever be shaming our teachers.
Classrooms. Relationships are instructional infrastructure. Developmentally appropriate practice is not optional. Equity requires conditions and supports, not slogans or buzzwords. Implementation reality matters as much as research findings.
Very much so. And about systems, oversimplified solutions usually fail real classrooms. Mandates without support create compliance and not quality. Complexity should be acknowledged and not hidden. And reform must be evaluated by classroom impact, not presentation language.
Well, what do we reject? And so there's a lot that we could go into detail, but the biggest thing we want to make sure that we lay the foundation for is false binaries. So going from one extreme to the next. We believe that that pendulum tends to swing from one direction to the other. Now we're doing this. Now we're at the other side. We're doing this, trying to fix it. And instead finding that middle ground where it's center for both. And we're going to be looking at both sides and finding that middle ground.
So we'll always come back to our core questions being, are we designing systems for compliance or for human development? And maybe even more importantly, is who is benefiting from these systems and who carries the costs?
And so our episodes are going to be framed pretty much the same way. We're going to talk about a real moment that occurs. So we'll be taking turns, bringing some folks in to discuss things as well, but taking a look at that real moment that occurs. We examine why it makes sense and look at the changes once we see it a little bit differently.
And we want to make sure that through this structure, we're also inviting our audience in and that you have a chance to think about this topic or issue as well. And some questions that we hope you'll carry with you through the episodes are things like, what is this problem solving? Who benefits from the structure and who doesn't benefit from the structure? What does this assume about learning? And like I said, we'll always be coming back to this. Are we designing systems for compliance or for human development? Because it's really, really important to us.
Absolutely. And again, as you mentioned, engaging. So we're hoping to engage with you as we move through this. We don't have the answers. You're going to find out. We are going to be authentically ourselves because we really don't know how else to be. You'll see our personalities seep through. We just want to take a closer look at things, and we want to be open-minded. We don't want to say that we prefer it this way, so this is right. We want to say, okay, I need to explore both perspectives and see where we're ending up. Once we start looking a little carefully, a lot of what feels confusing in education becomes more understandable. So it may be complicated and complex, but we can uncover and understand.
By taking a second look.